I want to welcome everyone to the 47th episode of Money Trees. Funny enough, web design is an often ignored element of our personal interactions on the internet. Today's guest by far has some of the best personal branding I've seen, full stop. By now, you may know that I love providing my own intros, but today I would be doing you all a disservice by not reading this guest bio verbatim. A Los Angeles based creative professional and a woman of many dimensions. Amina Yasmin spends her time researching Web3 and creating NFTs that synthesize her passions, including art, tech, music, and healing. Her creative practices prioritize making space to be a vessel and tool for collective healing through art alchemy, the process of transmuting energy into tangible form. Interpreting and transmuting the full spectrum of the human experience, she pours into her artwork through a blend of photography, digital collage, painting, and singing. That is such a well written and thought provoking bio, deserving of a creator with your skill set. I am really, really hyped to talk with you today. Let me start by asking, how are you feeling?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I feel so good, and thank you for that amazing intro. I feel really seen. I feel energized. I feel just really good today. How are you?
I am blessed. I'm back in New York. It's 75 and sunny. It's like that really nice springtime as the trees go from, really barren and we're starting to see all the flowers blossom. And I look out my window and there's like 13 different colors going on. So there's really no complaints on this end.
That sounds beautiful. I miss New York so much. I can't wait to be back there in June,
A,
coming up
is
soon.
that a NFT NYC preview? Is that what I'm hearing?
Definitely is. Definitely is. Yeah. Hoping to be there, hoping to maybe do a performance or a showing or two. We'll see.
Yo, I cannot wait for. I feel like when it happened it was like the beginning of November, early October. Oh no, wow, that's not how months work. The end of October, beginning of November. I didn't actually really attend too many events, but by the end of that week, I had come to know so many names in the space, and I'm excited for many of these names to be back in the city to get to see meetups and get to see more people IRL in person, in the physical world, trying to move away from actually saying IRL. And I do want to touch on that because you were doing some really ill IRL things in LA. But before we get there, I'm thinking about these flowers and I want to give you all of the flowers right now. I mentioned, there's a lot of things to cover here, but there were two elements I wanted to highlight just very early on. I already talked about your incredible personal branding. On top of that, your photography. Your photos are stunning. Pictures were the first form of art that like I was exposed to as a kid. My mom was a photographer for years, and when I dove into your portfolio, I was blown away. The color palette, the subjects, the framing. It was like each photo gave me a glimpse into a different world. And again, I talk about the subjects. You take pictures of so many different, I'll say things to generalize it, but it can be landscapes or people or food, and they all feel unique to like your style. And it's clear you have a love for photography. So I would love to know where that love started.
Thank you so much. I really feel so seen by you. I really appreciate you taking the time to properly dive into my work like as it was meant to be experienced. Definitely through my website is the best way to dive into my world, and I do really pride myself on being able to create these portals that can take you back to a feeling or a place or a memory, or yeah, just give you an opportunity to experience something different. And photography really, it was just always a love of mine from when I was a little kid. Even I was always the kid with the disposable cameras at school, or on field trips. And then as I was growing up, I continued my affinity for it. Just capturing moments and preserving history was really at the core of it, wanting to offer these memories as love offerings for the most part of my life. And a lot of the time I would think about all of the beautiful moments I was experiencing in life, and how I would hope that, everyone would get a chance to experience something like that. I would think about the people across the world who might not have access to the same experiences I have access to, and wanting to share that. And yeah, really just also like a love for my community, a love for the world around me. I just really do my best to like see life through rose colored glasses, and just seeing like the beauty in everything, and hoping that I can add that point of view, that perspective into the world. So that's really like the core of it for me. And then, but I had like such a moment with photography after I had graduated high school. I grew up in Sacramento, and like in high school, I was like the yearbook editor, like all of the cliche art girl things. I paid a lot of attention in art class and yearbook, and those were like my two saving graces growing up. I didn't really like care for anything else, but it was just that like my passions were so strong. It was clear what my path was. And it just carried me through. And so after growing up in Sacramento and having those experiences of being like, the friend in the group who always had the camera and et cetera, et cetera, I moved to San Francisco, and there was just like this explosion of street photography, and like this network of amazing artists and photographers. At the time, it was like a photo meetup called Flask Mob, where I met so many incredible artists and collaborators that I still am connected to this day. And it really like fueled my practice and allowed me to find community in this passion. Whereas before, it was like it can be a kind of individual pursuit, photography. It's like you and your camera and then the subject, which, sometimes is people, sometimes is places or food or whatever it might be. But having like a community of other photographers that we would just go out and shoot for like a whole day and just go with the flow and see what happens or came about, it would be that really allowed me to like expand in my practice and grow, and like also explore other mediums too. Like I met so many multifaceted people that like affirmed my multiplicity and didn't like, encourage me to put myself in a box. So, yeah, photography is definitely a lifelong love and will be a part of my life forever. And I can't wait to keep growing as a photographer and learning and, synthesizing it with all of my other practices and mediums.
Yo, that's so ill. I was laughing when you talked about having the disposable camera and then thinking about high school because I always wished that when I had my disposable camera, I would take it to Walmart and I would get back the footage or the film, and it would look amazing, and it never was. So shout out to you for having that eye at an early age. There's a lot that I want to dive into there, but I actually don't think I've ever asked this question, and you're talking about yearbook, so now I'm kind of interested. What was, or if you had, what was your yearbook superlative? Like, what were you most likely to be voted by your peers when you were in high school?
Okay, that's actually hilarious because I did get voted a superlative actually. I was voted the worst case of senioritis. Like I was just I really only showed up for class like halfway through the day, and it was literally so I could go to my art classes and yearbook classes. Those were my last two classes in the day. Barely graduated by the grace of God because I just knew what my passions were. I knew what I was meant to be doing, and I knew like that I also only had so much energy to pour into the day. It was like, I had a chaotic home life at the time, and so my energy levels were not as high as they could have been so that I could be like a high performing high school student. But it's interesting because it really does translate into my life now. Like I really only like my life is just literally art and photography. And I'm grateful for that. And it's funny that that was like foreshadowed when I was growing up, that it was so clear what I was meant to be doing, even at such a young age. And I knew like, I wasn't going to use, I mean, sure, math is great. Social studies, great. It did really help me a lot and I loved to learn, but I knew what I was meant to like really dive deep into. And so, yeah, worst case of senioritis, it made sense. I was barely there. I would show up to school with my little coffee in hand and in sweats, rolling out of bed, and that was that. So it was funny that I was voted that as the yearbook editor because I was like, damn. But, you know, that was
No,
that, huh?
I'm with you on so much there. I remember kind of the point in school where I was like, I don't think anything I want to do in life is going to involve the quadratic formula. And I
Right.
started to check out a little bit in that moment. Uh, it's kind of cool hearing the places along the West Coast that you've been able to spend a lot of time at. I think the West Coast is beautiful. I'm sure having, such rich areas like scenically rich scenery. Wow, I should get my vocab there. You know what I'm trying to say. Down. I think that helps with developing that passion, that love. Where has been your favorite place to shoot on the West Coast?
Ooh, great question. Honestly, so I lived in San Francisco for about 3 years, and my photography living there was just so on point, and it's just like a playground for a photographer for the most part. I explored so much of that city with my camera, and that's the lens in which I like remember the city through, and it's such a gift I was able to give myself, like all of these memories that are just I have forever. I can like, jump back into that moment through these photos. So yeah, definitely San Francisco, all of the nature spots out there. And like in the city, I used to like be really into, checking out the different views and rooftops and whatever I could find and just explore. But yeah, I would say San Francisco, and also just like driving up the coast, like along the ocean. Like Big Sur is beautiful. I definitely have an affinity for the ocean and for sunsets and photographing them. And so I used to love doing road trips up to like Big Sur and this place called Ocean Cove, and just anywhere that nature or like green trees and foresty vibes converge with like the water. That's where you can find me.
Yo, I really rock with San Fran. I think some of my best pictures, like Mission Dolores or Lombard Street, I know those are kind of
Hmm.
more mainstays, but it's such a beautiful city. Thinking about the landscape, that's so ill. I've never even thought about the coastal views because I think like I'm hearing you say it, I love driving up and along the five. Like I used to live in San Diego and would go up to LA, and those views were gorgeous. And I don't think I have any pictures from that time. So wow, there wasn't really a question in there. I was just thinking about that as you said it. Um, you really are a true multidisciplinary. We've been
Yeah.
talking about the photography side, and recently I've been thinking about the way Web3 allows like so many art forms to mesh into one cohesive experience. You recently put out a music NFT. It was the song that I played at the top that I genuinely think is a fire record. What made you want to put out music in the Web3 space?
Thank you. Honestly, I've been making music for the past 3, almost 4 years now, and I was so like putting myself in a box as a photographer and really like nervous about how it would be received. Since I was like living in the Bay Area for like 6, 7 years as a very prolific photographer. I shot like pretty much all events throughout the city, any festivals, any conferences. I was the go-to photographer. And so to pivot into music, especially like working in a lot of the music scene as a photographer for so long, I was just like, who am I though? Like, am I a photographer? Am I a singer? Can I be both? Is that okay in my career? Is that strange? And I had all of these questions and low key, like a little identity crisis. But I had so much music in the vault that was just like pouring out of me for years. And that I really did feel so passionate about, but also I was feeling kind of precious about for a long time. I was feeling like, okay, like I have all of this, but I kind of want to sit with it myself for a while first and also figure out a way to share it that feels equitable not only for me but for my collaborators. And Web3 just felt like a perfect introduction to that. And I had plans to roll out before 2020 came, but I think it's such a blessing that I chose to hold off and had more time to like really dive into the back end of the music industry and like enlighten myself with all kinds of knowledge about how the practices are just so archaic and think about solutions. And I've always been about, equity and making sure that like people are fairly compensated. And I really value art so much, visual art, music, writing, all of it. I think it's all so powerful and valuable that as soon as I heard about Web3 and what it was doing for artists, period, I was just like, wow, this is what I was waiting for to release. This is like what I can use to be able to tell the story I want to tell, not only with my art and my music, but also the story of value. Like, I love that we are currently in a value revolution and that we are now able to not only talk about how art and music has crazy inherent value and it needs to be valued across the board. And now here's this like channel to do so and pour abundance into ourselves and our communities and circulate it and have this collective economy, but also like the history, like archiving aspect of Web3 is just so cool to me. Like, I am so curious to see what happens in 50 to 100 years, past my lifetime, and what the generations after me are going to have access to. Like, I would really love my art and music offerings to be like generational artifacts in my family. I would love my work to provide generational wealth for my family and really like heal this like money wound that myself and so many people have, because money at the end of the day is energy. And so I've been working with, healing that in myself before I discovered Web3, and this is just an an addition to what I was already doing. And so to release like my music NFTs along with my single was a huge step for me. Like, this is the first single I've ever released ever, ever, ever. This is the second song I've had mixed and mastered ever, ever, ever by my friend Tommy Phoenix, actually, who is also in Web3 these days. I'm waiting on their release. But yeah, it just felt so special. And I was able to finally like create the collaborations that I want to create. And like, hopefully when these sell, be able to make sure that everyone on the team is fairly compensated and given their worth. So yeah, it was a really special release for me. And I collaborated with my friend Tara, who is a visual artist, 3D designer. They do a lot of like live performance visuals. They're incredible. And they brought me in to their Web3 project, which is called Moves. And essentially, what it is like a two-part NFT project, ongoing series where artists will send Tara like a video of them dancing, and then Tara will animate it. And it can be like you dancing to your own song, or like if you're a visual artist, it's like dancing maybe like in a space of like your design. And then a piece that was creative directed by myself, which was my NFT flow space, which was this 3D design that Tara modeled after a painting that I did, which the painting was referenced from a digital collage that I made, which was from photos that I shot of like the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. And I'm half Egyptian. My family lives right across the street from the pyramids of Giza. You can see the pyramids like from their window. They have like a bay window that frames the pyramids. And I met my family out there in 2015 for the first time as an adult. It was just very like potent for me to be able to visit my ancestral land and like have ties there, and it just feels so unreal. And the song Can't Be There For You, it really is about setting boundaries and taking time for yourself. Like, my whole life I've been such a people pleaser, and just pouring so much of my energy into those around me, which, don't get me wrong, I love to do and I want to do, but I also know that I have work to do, like in my lifetime, of uncovering my ancestry and of like breaking generational curses and healing generational trauma. And so to visit my ancestral lands, like with having no experience of it or connection to it prior to then, was just like huge for me. And so flow space is like, I feel like when I dream, I go to this place, which is flow space, and I flow, I do my healing, I meditate in there. Like my dream space is very, very vivid. And so all of my art and all of my stories kind of converge with these NFTs. And I can't wait to continue telling this story for ever, you know? Like I hope that this story lives in a history book one day. And I hope that NFTs live in history books, and I know they will. And it's just really cool to be a part of this movement and like be able to have these different avenues and platforms where I feel like I can finally tell my story so thoroughly, you know?
Yo, absolutely. It's ill. It sounds like you're finding so much meaning and purpose in the space. And to me, that's like the real beauty about the opportunity blockchain is providing artists is you now have this kind of sandbox to express yourself and to also create long-standing cultural relics and financial opportunities that will extend far beyond you. You know, the idea behind this immutable ledger that will exist long after we're gone. And so that is ill. Definitely loving all of the Egypt talk, the Pyramid of Khufu. Might need to talk to your fam, see if I can go chill there for a little. Talking about connecting with my actual name. I've never even gotten to go. Um, Tara, this is another seed that maybe will be planted on this show and get to grow. I saw art by Josh share the video that had all of the artists dancing in there. And it was such a, I hate to like I don't say speaking hyperbole, but I've never seen anything like it. And that was ill to me because I'm looking at this 2D kind of animation style and I'm like, yo, like, wait, what is this? Is this a reference to something else? Oh, yo, these are actually people from the space that are all in this. I thought it was like a house party. I wasn't 100% sure what it was, but I was
Mm-hmm.
captivated by it when I saw it. And I would love to talk to them on the show. And I had put them on my guest list after I saw that. I'm like, okay, we have some mutuals. Let me figure out and see if there's anything that makes sense here because, and I hadn't seen anything like it. And I was so captivated when I saw that. So, yes, that is ill. You mentioned how prolific of a photography career you had when you were in the Bay. The website blew me away. And then as I did my research, your portfolio speaks for itself with the brands and the artists that you've captured. So more flowers there. If we have some more time at the end, I would actually love to hear about some of your favorite experiences with those artists or brands, or any highlights you have from that space. But before I touch on that, I'm really interested to see how you're finding balance in this space, where to me it can feel very overwhelming with the amount of information, and you highlight that you're doing a lot of research in there. And that research, at least I know on my end, tends to not necessarily always be creative. And you're mentioning the music backlog that you have and finally being able to express yourself sonically. And you already have the photography element that's been a constant in your life. And you've talked about how burnout burnout's a lot more likely when you have to do everything on your own, when you have to be PR, when you have to do the creative, when you have to figure out the marketing, and managing all of the creative elements that you have with doing everything on your own, with exploring new ventures. Like for you, how are you finding balance amongst all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am such a hustler, you know, and I'm a slow burn. Like, I've learned from burnout after, I've been a freelancer for 7 years. So, like, it's not for the faint of heart. It's really not. And I've experienced, balance, I've experienced burnout, I've experienced flow. And now that I know what flow feels like, and now that I am so much better at like having foresight and like feeling into my gut for when I need rest and when I need inspiration and when I need to maybe just do absolutely nothing. and when I need to sprint, right? I pretty much like try to understand my creative practices through a multitude of frameworks, and my work is really just trying to understand myself better so that I can function better. Growing up, I didn't have like much structure or discipline, and I even almost joined the Marine Corps because I wanted it that bad. I wanted structure and discipline so badly that I was willing to allow the military to break me down and build me up again so I could feel something, but I'm glad I didn't do that because my life would be completely different than it is now. But that experience taught me that I do, in fact, crave that kind of level of self discipline, self respect, and pursuit of like a higher self. And essentially what I do now is I just really feel into my intuition. I feel into my gut. I ask myself what I need at all times, and I am forgiving towards self regardless of what it is I need. Even if I have a huge roster of things to do in all of these different arenas of my life, whether I'm researching NFTs or I have a photo project that has a due date, or I'm working on a song and getting it mixed and sending notes back and forth, like I make sure that my basic needs are taken care of and that I'm comfortable so that I can continue to sustain these efforts, so that I can continue the marathon that is life, And it's like I have to eat well, I have to sleep 8 hours a day, I have to, make sure that I have those needs met, and meditate when I can and write when I can. And I am such an introspective person. Sometimes I will do this like inner work for hours before I start on any like real work. And I'll go up to my roof, I'll meditate, I'll journal. I will really just tap in with myself first and foremost before doing anything else. And that has kept me very balanced and very like um, I guess just in tune with myself versus in the past I would run around and race around and try and like fit everything that I could into my day when it was just impossible, and I would run myself ragged, and that felt not good at all. So just doing the opposite of that, making sure that I'm like balanced and centered and grounded before I do anything, because sure I can spend hours in Twitter spaces and compile a bunch of different research and data. But if I'm not going out and getting actual sunlight, that's a problem. If I'm not drinking water, that's a problem. If I'm not feeding myself a full meal before my coffee, that's a problem. If I'm not taking a walk, that's a problem. And for a while, I mean, I first found out about Web3 last March in 2021, and I was just in a deep research hole from that point, right? Like most of us are, we just end up jumping in, and all of the sudden a week has gone by and we don't know what day it is, we don't know what month it is, what we ate. Like that definitely happened, and I had to pull back and say, okay, this is like a long-term thing. So I need to treat this as a long-term pursuit. I need to make sure I'm taking breaks. I need to remember that I'm one of the early ones, and so there's no need to rush. There's no need to feel like I have to catch up because I'm actually on the cutting edge, which for the first time I feel like.
Yeah, I relate
Yeah.
to that so much. I this happened to me not even well, actually 2 months ago today, right around Valentine's Day. I just felt like all of a sudden I had put myself in a sort of rat race where I constantly needed to be knowing every single thing that was happening and absorbing as much information as I could and just ignoring some of my favorite things like going outside for a walk or getting some sun. And I stress that to people even prior to anything Web3 related, where it's like, yo, just go outside. Like, it's okay. Like, we don't need to work these crazy, crazy, insane hours. I hate that there's like this badge of honor you get from doing 90, 100-hour weeks, where I feel like humans just shouldn't have to do that to make a living. And we also, not that we shouldn't reward it, but I just feel like it doesn't need to be the only path. Where that works for some people, but I would argue the majority of people can benefit a lot from finding that work and life balance. And yeah, even when you're aware of it, sometimes you do have to recalibrate. And I had to take that time away and step back. So I definitely, definitely relate to that. thinking about Web3, and then we talked a little bit earlier, like physical experiences that go hand in hand with that. There's some really cool ones that are starting to happen in New York with like 24 hours in Bass Studio. They're doing Web3 Wednesdays, or Float is doing like live vote shows where musicians can come and play their music at really cool venues and get like free catalog mints. I had saw that you were in the process of developing a creative loft in downtown LA. Can you talk a little bit about the purpose behind that and how that process is going?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in downtown LA. I have access to a few different spaces, which feels amazing. And I moved here in the middle of the pandemic in August of 2020 and immediately just had visions of like, just gatherings and salons and like intentional conversations and space sharing, and definitely had a huge craving for that. And as soon as, it felt like safe to do so, I started like hosting, small little gatherings here and there, little creative salons where we would share work and just talk about what we're working on and that kind of thing. And then in, I think it was November, I was asked to speak on a panel about NFTs and the future of like film. And that was really cool. That was in Glendale. And after that, it was just like made so much sense to start kind of hosting more like onboarding talks and NFT salons and just discussions. I really wanted to like inform my community about what's happening in Web3. And I have like, a background as like an art educator. And I think I do a good job of breaking things down. And so I held my first NFT salon, I think it was in December, here in downtown LA. And it was for women and non binary people. I just really wanted to make space for folks who might not have access to, someone who could speak their language. And that went super well. I was able to share like a bunch of different use cases of what has been going on in Web3 and all of the artists it's been serving, all of the artists whose lives have flipped upside down in the best possible way, where their work is being valued sometimes for the first time in this real tangible way of like this energy exchange. And so have had two of those so far, and then have also like been diving into, stewarding more music community here as well with my friend Ayana. Her Twitter is Fairy Godmommy, and we had actually been friends for a while like online, but hadn't really spent too much time in person together. And she ended up coming to one of the Web3 meetups I hosted, and we just have been building ever since. And we both had a vision of like these jam sessions happening, and so we've held 5 of those so far, in a couple different lofts downtown LA. And that has just been so immensely powerful for community building and like just letting our inner child like run free, without the pressure of like having to cut a record or having to like make sure all of the sounds are perfect. Just kind of like community jamming all at once together, and like it just feels very like unifying and like helping. It's just such a beautiful release. And so I definitely have plans to host more meetups, like maybe more publicly, somewhere around downtown LA, and just do more stuff with community in general, because we definitely all need it. We are so in need of like coming back together, and we definitely are doing that these days. So it feels good to be like stewarding community and stewarding these spaces and holding space that feels safe,
Absolutely. I think the pandemic created and we've been dealing with it for so long that we've started to find some comfort in the digital connection. And not that those connections can't be strong. I just feel that the human connection it requires, and this is just my take on it, but that in person kind of physical, being able to give someone a hug or just see them in the same space as them, share the same space as them, provides another layer that the internet just can't recreate yet. And so finding ways to bring these communities from, your computer or your mobile phone into your everyday real life, knowing that there's people who are going to the same stores as you or, shopping at the same malls as you that share these interests, it really will help shift the kind of energy and mindset that's in the space. So I love that. Like, shout out to y'all and what you were building there. I think those types of spaces are absolutely crucial to Web3 becoming something more than just like a tech broy metaverse. I don't even want to use any negative terms, but I think that these types of spaces are crucial. On a bit of a lighter turn, another piece that I had saw on top of you moving to LA at the start of the pandemic, I saw that you are now a cat mom.
Yes, I have a cat. Her name is Sayla. Um, yeah, I couldn't actually decide on her name, so I gave her five names. Her
What are
full
the other
name is,
four?
I got you. It's Sayla Violet Chartreuse Asterix. Very extra, her mom's a Leo, so yeah. But she has been such a saving grace for me. Like, I got her on Valentine's Day of 2020. Literally walked by a window and saw her, and it was love at first sight. So obviously, I had to bring her home, and best decision of my life. It was very impulsive, though. I definitely had plans to get a cat, but I was like waiting for the right one, and she was the right one.
Yeah,
So
no,
I'm
that's
super grateful for her.
heck yeah, that's awesome. I felt like we'd been talking, not that it were serious topics, but I just saw the cat and I was like, oh no, it's such a cute cat. And I got to cat sit for a year and it was the greatest cat ever. But I feel like I was spoiled now because I'm just worried that if I actually got my own cat, the cat may not be as incredible. So anyway, a little bit of a tangent there. Um, we touched on the fact that you've had quite a prolific career as a photographer. What has been, and maybe not your single favorite, but just some of the most memorable or ones that stand out to you the most, photo shoots that you've had, whether it was artists or brands?
Yeah, that's a great question too. That's so hard. Honestly, I have like very fond memories of almost all of my photo shoots, and it's really because every time I shoot photos, it I just do my best to see the subject through the lens of love, and I'm able to like, fall in love with everybody and everything because of that. But I think that my favorite moments are the ones where I'm able to, like, I love portrait shoots, and like personal branding shoots. Like, I love creating a visual language for people, brands, like their music projects. And it just feels like such an honor and a gift every time someone chooses me as their photographer, because I know that it's such a saturated, industry, and like it's just it's just such an honor every time. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely have a huge affinity for like live music photography. That is actually a huge reason why I decided to take myself seriously as a musician, because I was kind of illuminated to the fact that I had such an affinity for music through photography, through the like how much I wanted to shoot live music and how much it fueled me and how much I related to the artists that I would photograph. And I would see myself in them and be like, oh, maybe this is for me too. But I was able to shoot my first like official music festival in 2018, which was Soul Bloom Festival in Sacramento. It was in my hometown, and it just felt very full circle. And that was just so much fun. I felt like I just had the chance to really shine in that moment. And that's where one of my favorite digital collage pieces was born. That Janae Aiko Under the Pisces Moon piece, I photographed that at Soul Bloom using all of the photos like from that day, aside from the neon rainbow. But yeah, I have such an affinity for live music, and so to be able to photograph some of my favorite artists, Janae Aiko, FKA Twigs, Quinn, Who else have I photographed? JoJo. Yeah, it just feels really incredible. Another, I honestly love to shoot for cannabis brands as well. I'm a huge advocate for cannabis. And yeah, I feel like a lot of freedom when I get hired to do those kinds of things because I can create the feeling that you get when you smoke, like through my photography. And that feels really fun for me because I love to allude to certain energies through my visual art. And I think, yeah, that's a really like safe space to do it. So this one shoot I did last year, we went up to Malibu. My friend like had his aunt's car. It was like this gorgeous blue car, and I was able to cast and pay all of my friends to be the models for this lifestyle shoot for Flowcana. And that was just like super fun. We just got to do our thing and create like this cinematic like little photo series of what it feels like to be, high and free and flowy. I also love travel photography. That's a given. What else can I think of? There was this shoot, which I think is still one of my favorite shoots to this day with my friend Pooja. She goes by Fijiana. She is an Indo-Fijian singer, rapper, and we created a visual language for her first single ever, which was titled Identity. And those photos just feel so strong to me to this day. The cover is one of my favorites ever. I also shot the cover of this album for my friend Roginder. His album is called Moment in Time, and I was able to collaborate with one of my favorite stylists. Her name is Riva Bat, Hybrid Hues. That's my girl. Yeah, and that cover just came out so beautiful. I posted about it recently, and he like made a limited edition like release of records with the album, and being able to hold that record in my hand with the cover design that I have done, it's definitely going to help me manifest more covers because that's just what I want to do. And first of all, the album is just stunning. Like, he is a violinist and an incredible producer, and so I love to do cover art and collaborate like conceptually with artists on their music, visual identity, and rollouts and such. I've done quite a few of that, like those types of shoots. And it always just feels like, again, I just feel so like blessed every time that happens. I'm like, wow, you trust me for this thing that is so precious to you. Like, thank you for trusting me. And I just want to do my best every single time.
The
But it's
colors
really
were so crazy on that cover, by the way.
like,
Keep going,
thank
keep going.
you. Yeah, it's really like just the connections that I've been able to build through photography, all of the relationships that have come from these photo shoots that, maybe I never would have crossed paths with these people had it not been for photography. And it's such like a world opener for me in that way. And so I know it's kind of a cop out to be like, all of my shoots are my favorite shoot, but but I have
Nah,
such
I
a
don't
good
think it's
time
a
every
cop out.
time.
I don't think it's a cop out at all. It's like you can hear the passion, you can hear the excitement, and it's genuine. And so to me, I don't like, you don't have to choose there. I love that. I love that you enjoy so much of what you're doing. I think that, kind of touching back on my point earlier about like not having to overwork yourself to any particular outside standard. It's like, yo, it's great that you love almost all of the shoots or all of the shoots that you do. Like that's how it should be. It's an art form that you've loved since you were young, and so when it's work and it feels great, like yeah, that's to me that's awesome. Uh, when you talked about shooting for the cannabis brands, it made me think of a really funny tweet you had where you said, "I hit the bong, but it hit me back. Oops," and that was so relatable. But there was another really, really relatable tweet that I'd like to read where, and this happens to me all the time. And so I was like, wow, I love this. And it got me thinking about this word in a completely different instance than I ever had before. But there's a lot of times when I say I'm overthinking and I'm like, oh, wait, no, I'm starting to spiral. And you say, when did the word spiraling get such a bad rep? The way I look at how life happens, watching circles form backwards, we always come back to where we once were and we show up changed. That's a spiral. And those are some of my most favorite experiences. Spiraling is nice. And I love that. It was just such like a 180 kind of perspective on this term that we normally have this negative connotation with. And just by looking at that spiraling from a different lens, the lens of love, which is in a, I don't know if that's trademark, but you should, because I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that. Um, it was really really ill, and I know that that's going to be something that I kind of keep in my memory bank for future references when I feel that emotion starting to come up. So I just wanted to share that on here because I think that someone else may hear it and find more solace in those words as well.
Wow, you just had me so hype like that you just read that tweet cuz I forgot about that tweet and I love like being able to, literally what that tweet said, like revisit moments and all of the sudden you're at the same place you once were but you're changed. Like that is such experience. And I love leaving myself those little nuggets of wisdom for the future to come back to because it is such a spiral upwards. Like, even if we think we've lost our way, we're just on a spiral upwards. We are spiraling upwards towards our higher version of ourselves, our future. And it's like sometimes I really do believe in like quantum leaping and like divine orchestrated change and like this life is just so divine and that we're always going to be like visiting these moments and sometimes our higher self will like leave us little nuggets here and there for us to discover so that we can become them. And I feel that way all the time. I'm always like looking around feeling like I'm in like the Truman Show, just like, did y'all see that? Because that's something that I would have like that would have never happened. But it's always feeling like a glitch in the matrix. Like I'm always like, okay, clearly I've been here before, but it wasn't me, it was my future self. But like all of the timelines, like past, present, and future, I really do believe that they all exist simultaneously. And so it's not far off to then say, okay, if I want to, I can really jump into that higher timeline and I can spiral up towards it. And that's where a version of me already lives. Like I'm already them. So why can't I be them now? Right. And that's kind of like the paradigm that I try to exist from at all times of like understanding that like where I'm at is perfectly fine because my higher self is where they're supposed to be at and I'm on my way there. If not, I'm already there. Like I'm already them. A version of me is already them. But that's a
Yeah,
little
no, that's I that is going to be I'm about to talk to you earlier a little bit about it, but like one of the clips where that was so eloquently said, I am not going to even muddy it with any of my potential jumble jargon. See, look at that. It's already starting. Yo, Amina, this has been such a fire conversation. There are two questions I ask everyone before I let them go. The first question is going to be, what is your seed phrase? You've already dropped a lot of gems here today. And normally, seed phrase in the Web3 crypto space is going to be your account recovery key. I just don't think that that term screams security. And so on Money Trees, we're repurposing seed phrase to be a saying, a quote, a slogan, a lyric, motto that you live by that embodies your approach to your art, to your craft, to your career. Amina Yasmin, what is your seed phrase?
Oh man, this is hard, but honestly, I'm just going to keep saying what I've been saying, which is to live through the lens of love. Like, that's what I try to do. That's what I hope people can find for themselves to see the world through the lens of love because there's not much you can complain about or worry about when you are looking at the world through the lens of love. It's like gives you so much more grace to just be if that's the lens you're living through. So that's my seed phrase.
That is perfect, genuinely. Like, even it's such a good example with using that spiraling quote, because that's looking at something through the lens of love. And how can we take this perceived negative and look at it in a way that empowers us and allows us to not feel any ill will towards it? So, that is a really, really great seed phrase. My second question is going to be, we have this one of one money trees number 47 note. What are we going to list it for?
Okay, so I really want this to be accessible to our community. So we're gonna list it for 0.22 ETH. Hopefully someone scoops that up. I don't know who,
Ah,
but
there it
whoever that
is.
goes to, it's a blessing, you know? I hope you
See,
enjoy it.
the idea behind the notes is that I have these incredible guests that come on, share their time and space and passion and love and process with us here in this digital landscape, right? And when I thought about how the blockchain could play into a talk show and do a podcast, audio kind of made sense to me, but it still feels just a little premature for the space with like, I want these people's words to still be accessible in these conversations to potentially help act as onboarding methods, whether it's the clips or the full episodes or perspectives that new people can hear and find a way into the space. And so I said, okay, let's do the digital art side of this. And it's the main reason why I allow the guests to price their NFTs because it's not necessarily about selling the NFT. It's about making whatever statement you want with your immortalized version of this conversation. I think as your star continues to grow and shine, people will be very thirsty to collect some of your NFTs, and they may stumble upon and say, "Oh, well, here's one. Here's one that someone hasn't had yet." So, yeah, this has been really, really ill. I think that again, you dropped some gems in here, and I'm excited for more people to hear about your process, about the way that you approach your art. It's so again like I can especially speak to the photography because that was the largest sample size of your creativity that I had, but it was very, very moving, and the love that you have for your craft is evident. And so I appreciate you taking your time to share with us and talk about it.
Thank you for having me. This was such a beautiful, nourishing, life giving conversation. And I really appreciate you for pouring love and light into me on this fine. I guess in New York, it's the afternoon. For me, it's low key the morning, but I appreciate you so much. And like holding space like this, it's definitely such an art. And I really want to commend you for your space holding gift because this was so fluid. And I feel like I really had space to share my story. So thank you so much. This was an amazing time. I can't wait to share this conversation with others who weren't able to tune in with us. Can't wait to see what the future holds. Like, I just hope you have a great, great day and a great life. And I'm glad we're here in Web3 together. I'm so grateful for all of the connections it has brought to me as well.
Wishing you all of the same. And yeah, on that note, we will end it, and I will catch you all later. You enjoy the rest of your day, weekend, and life as well. Peace out.
Peace.